Lane Kiffin is meeting with Ole Miss today. I am really glad that right about now, I'm not a diehard fan of the Rebels.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. And thank you all so much for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network out there. How serious is BYU's upset alert at Cincinnati? I'll talk with Jake Hatch to find out. And I'm giving it another go. My best bets need a big bounce back, and I'm starting with the Notre Dame game. Which side? You'll have to find out. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Ole Miss fans right now have to be incredibly frustrated and annoyed. And that's why today I am glad I'm not a fan of the Rebels. Because this whole back and forth between Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and there's reportedly a meeting happening today where, I don't know, a decision could get met. We don't really know. There's going to be a meeting. That's all I'm going to talk about. But I just want to look at this through the lens of the Ole Miss fans and how bad this has to feel. Your team has proven this year that they are playoff caliber. And do I think they're a national championship team? Probably not. But are they capable of winning a game or two? Yeah, I believe they are. And you know what? I'm not always right about those things. Maybe they win a game or two. Someone else suffers a major injury, and suddenly you've got a real chance when otherwise you might have. That's the sort of thing that only happens to teams that have an opportunity. Ole Miss making the playoff would be a big deal. I think regardless of how they do in the postseason, it would be arguably the best season in the history of Ole Miss football because Lane Kiffin has taken them to new heights, but he's never taken them to the playoff. Coming off a season last year in which they should have made the playoff, came up well short, largely due to Kiffin's shortcomings as a head coach in certain spots. I still think he's a really good head coach. I'm just saying in a couple of moments last year. But you have a great opportunity. You control your own destiny. Beat Mississippi State, you're 100% guaranteed to be in the playoff. Lose to Mississippi State, and you might still be like 60% a lock to get into the college football playoff. And during the bye week, in the lead up to the Egg Bowl next week, which will be spectacularly fun, all Ole Miss fans are thinking about right now is all that's in the news. And that's whether or not he wants to even be there. And I think one way or the other, if I were an Ole Miss fan, put myself in those shoes for a moment. I don't want to hear some wishy-washy, back and forth, say a bunch of words, but say nothing at all, coach speak, non-declarative answer. I want to know, are you entertaining the LSU or Florida jobs? And if you are, can you just go? Because I don't know why he would stay to coach unless he wants to stay there with his guys. Okay, but does that make it a good experience for Ole Miss fans? Watching the game play out, knowing he doesn't want to be there. Is that really what you want to do? Because I'd say give me a guy that's on the sideline that wants to be there and is not thinking about going somewhere else. I don't want to watch that. And this is completely frustrating as well, and at some level unfair to the Ole Miss football team because they're not involved in this decision right now. I'm sure Lane Kiffin's considering those guys who he's recruited and retained and developed and had a bunch of success with. And I don't think that Lane Kiffin is a horrible guy for being in this spot. This does speak to the horrible nature and completely illogical structure of the college football calendar that all this has to happen now. Why? Because the portal, though we got rid of the early window before bowl season, which is good, they still moved it to a point that exists during the college football season in the middle of the playoff. And so close after the season that any school that wants to hire a new coach wants to get him in play. James Franklin is already the next head coach of Virginia Tech. He's already there. It's November. This sort of stuff should be taking place and dominating the news cycle in the months following the season. And then there should be a portal window. And then you have spring football. And then maybe, a national signing day gets pushed back to February. Please get rid of the early one. But all of those considerations are fair and legitimate for an athletic department to consider. And then you look up and go, well, we don't want to wait until January. We'll miss the portal. Which for a lot of programs has been a life preserver to not just build a roster, but to compete and contend immediately. Think about what Indiana has done. Think about what Colorado did a couple of years ago. They went from 1-11 to the most electric 4-8 football team of all time. And then they went 9-4. They were doing that during the portal. Well, you can't when you only have one transfer portal opening, you can't let that window just go. Now, I wouldn't be as concerned with it, but I'm not an administrator in that spot. So this constant back and forth. Like Ole Miss fans are waiting for Lane Kiffin to get down on a knee and propose. They're the girl that's waiting. Hey, man, are you going to man up and just make this offer already so that we can go forward? Or is there somebody else? It's Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne and Rachel Dawes in The Dark Knight. That's what it is. Rachel's unsure. Well, I can't say yes to Harvey right now because in the back of her mind, there's Bruce. I don't have an answer. Yeah, no one wants to hear something to the effect when Harvey Dent asks her to marry him, I don't have an answer. That's not what any Ole Miss fan wants to hear. My skin would crawl beyond belief. Frankly, if I were a lifelong, diehard Ole Miss Rebel fan, and Lane Kiffin, after the meeting, doesn't come out and say anything other than, I'm going to be the head coach at Ole Miss until you decide to fire me. Because it's been pretty well reported by Joel Klatt and others that there is not a money issue at Ole Miss. That they are saying, what does it take? We want to keep, they're committed to winning. Obviously, because they keep on winning. And we know that's not an easy thing to do year in and year out in college football. Ask Brian Kelly at LSU. So I just think that Ole Miss fans, if it's, I want to go elsewhere, or if it's, I don't know, I'm kind of caught in between. Like, I don't want to be your second choice. Who does? If you commit to Ole Miss, great. We're good. If you've got a ring in your back pocket and you're ready to present it, you went and got it at Tiffany or whatever, great. That's fantastic. And now we're excited. But if it's anything other than that, man, if I were an Ole Miss fan, I'd be so turned off. So unbelievably turned off. So I feel for Rebels fans, for the football players as well that are caught in the middle of this. This is what happens when the wrong people run the sport. You get a calendar that is so unbelievably screwed up that a coach is having to decide whether or not he wants to go compete for a national championship or leave the school in the middle of the season. Not middle, while the season is going on, because it's not smack dab in the middle, but you get what I'm saying. So all of this to me is just utter ridiculousness, and I hope that there's resolution. I hope Lane Kiffin either says, I'm staying at Ole Miss. I love it here. Have what I need to win, and we're going to go compete for national championships. I hope he either says that or he decides, I want to go be the head coach of the Florida Gators. I've maxed out my time. I loved it here at Ole Miss. And you can have somebody on the sideline for the remaining games who wants to be there in Oxford and doesn't have 1 foot or more out the door. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, Ole Miss fans. Hit me up on Twitter at @LockedOn_CFB. All of that. BYU, small favorite at Cincy this week. What happens if they lose? How likely is that anyway? First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football, we know it's back. It's in full swing. The tailgates, the rivalries that are around the corner, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you want to use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see? is what you pay. I'm going to a basketball game on Monday, Oregon and Auburn in Las Vegas. Got my tickets through Game Time. Not only did I save money compared to other ticketing sites, I know because I checked, but the process was easy. The all-in pricing feature is the best. I hate getting tagged with late fees or taxes or whatever at the end, and it jacks up the price. Game Time isn't about that. Shows you what the total is up front, and that's what it is. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Just how real is the upset alert this week for BYU? Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here to discuss just that. It's only BYU minus 2.5, according to our friends at FanDuel, Jake. They're going to Cincinnati. It's ripe for an upset. I want to get to that game in a moment. I want to start with this.
Okay.
BYU is one spot in the committee's rankings ahead of Utah. You're telling me one of two things, both of which seem crazy with that being the case. If BYU loses this game, they will not drop. Or you'll drop BYU and Utah together. Or BYU loses this game, they'll be ranked behind Utah with the same record in the head-to-head win. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, but I think the precedent has been set with what we're seeing with Notre Dame and Miami. Honestly, if they lose this game, Spencer, there's a very good chance that you see BYU ranked behind Utah, much like Notre Dame and Miami, despite BYU and Miami having head-to-head wins.
I can't stand it. I don't fully understand it. When the committee is talking about, well, we don't feel like they're in the same group. I'm like, whoa. Yeah. We don't need to play the hypothetical game. It's happened on the field.
Correct. And to your point, I don't know if you saw what Kevin Clark said earlier. So we were recording this on Thursday night. He said it on Feinbaum about the fact that this committee, for whatever reason, Spencer, is rating losses more than they're rating wins. Losses matter more to them than wins actually do. And that's wrong. You need to value the wins and what programs have accomplished on the field versus downgrading them simply due to a loss or two that you may not like.
By the way, that's not even applicable to their own rankings because guess what? Alabama's inside the top 10. Who'd they lose to?
Hi, Florida State.
Florida State? Oh, boy. Yeah, let's...
And that's the other part of it. When you lose matters, apparently.
Oh, 100%. And that's unfortunately been the case for a while. In my rankings, if Miami does wind up at 10-2, I will have them ahead of Notre Dame. I might keep both out of the playoff. In principle, I'm not actually opposed to 10-2 teams missing the playoff because I always, above all else, value the regular season and say I want games to matter. I want us all to feel losses. I want the impacts to be real. And if you can go 10-2, as teams did last year, unfortunately one of those was BYU and missed the playoff, then we keep some of what college football used to be, which is essentially, a 12-week double elimination playoff. That's what it used to be, not what it is, but we'd be closer to that if we leave out this pending car crash of 10-2 squads.
You're right. And I know that BYU fans obviously remember what happened a season ago and feel kind of hard done by. And if it happens again, Spencer, I'm just going to say it'll be BYU's own fault because they have everything within their control right now and they can ill afford a loss at this juncture. Yeah,
let's talk about the possibility of that happening. Vegas, of course, thinks it is very likely. And look, I don't think it's crazy. Because they're on the road. Cincinnati's probably ticked off. They're either ticked off or demoralized. There's no in between. Because going into last week, the Bearcats controlled their own fate to, yes, win the Big 12 and go to the college football playoff. And now they're likely going to do neither of those things because they lost at home to an Arizona team who's good. I wouldn't call them great, but they are good. So when Cincinnati takes the field, what do you expect their team mindset to be?
I think this is a team that's going to come out with a little bit of fire, and obviously they're going to want to bounce back from back-to-back losses to Utah and Arizona. But the issue I have, Spencer, is if BYU jumps on them early, I think they'll quit. I legitimately think if you go out there, let's say BYU takes the ball first, goes down the field and scores, they get a big turnover early on in this game, I think Cincinnati will just roll over and die at that point. I think they'll just say, okay, you know what? So be it. We're done here.
We can add starting hot to a big key for BYU in this game then?
Yeah, well, so I'll tell you this. Do you know what BYU's record is under Kalani Sitake when they score first in a game by chance?
How many years has Sitake been the head coach?
10 years. They have played 6 such games when they've scored first.
They've played how many?
60.
56-4.
51-9, but still pretty good record though. Like BYU, when they get a fast start and they score first in these games, more often than not, they win these football games, and that's going to be a huge key on the road to keep the crowd out at Nippert Stadium out of this game.
As you and people who know me very closely, Jake, know, I am a junkie when it comes to trivia, and I'm a Jeopardy diehard. So that you could see my interest peak up when I was like, oh, impromptu trivia, yeah, let's go for it. So let's talk further about this game. I think an essential element for BYU, a lot of people, I don't want to call them average college football fans, would say, well, you got to slow down Brendan Sorsby. No. You got to take away the Cincinnati run game. You have got to be able to, including Sorsby, he can move, but it's the Bearcats' rushing attack, I think, that has fueled their success this season for Scott Satterfield and company. And I think if BYU takes that away, I don't even think the Cougars have to run the ball all that well. By the way, this would be a great Mike Leach hypothetical mascot battle, a Bearcat and a Cougar. I need his thoughts on that. RIP forever and always. But I don't think BYU has to go gangbusters on the ground and go for 240 or something like that. I think they just need to keep Cincinnati under 150, and I think BYU's just fine.
Yeah, well, they have Evan Pryor coming back. At least he's probable on the injury report, and that's a big re-addition to the lineup for Cincinnati because him and Tawee Walker have been a fantastic combination of running back, Spencer. But BYU has absolutely got to shut down that rushing attack. You mentioned keep Cincinnati under $150. That's probably a big key to a win here. BYU's whole defense, the philosophy that Jay Hill deploys is that they are going to shut down the run first and foremost. They want to force this game onto the arm of the opposing quarterback. In this case, it'd be Brendan Sorsby, and they'll take their chances. And if you beat him with your arm, speaking of the opposing quarterback, they'll kind of tip your cap to you. But BYU's whole philosophy is to shut down the rushing attack.
Brendan Sorsby is a guy who you could tip your cap to at the end of the day and say, well, you beat us. I think he's played well enough this season to do that. Not last week against Arizona, but hey, that's the past. Welcome to the present. If Cincinnati does win this game, Jake, what do you think it looks like? What plays out that leads to the Cougars' second loss?
BYU turning the ball over multiple times in this game. I really do think that's going to be, obviously, as often is the turnover margin, but BYU, especially this year, when they win the turnover margin, they're near unbeatable. And if they play clean football, they're going to win this football game, it feels like. But I do think that this is going to be a game, if Cincinnati can make it ugly early, because I don't think it's going to be a shootout, but if Cincinnati gets a couple turnovers early, gets the crowd into it, and BYU feels like they're under the gun once again after struggling on the road in the previous road game at Texas Tech, some of those demons may creep back into the mind of BYU players, and that's how I think Cincinnati pulls it off.
It's time, Jake. What's your score prediction?
I've been thinking all week about this, and I think the scoreline we saw last week from Cincinnati and Arizona is actually similar to what I expect to play out in this game. I've got BYU winning at 31-23, obviously covering the spread there, but I do think it's kind of in that realm.
Well, obviously.
Yes.
I, as the biggest BYU hater in the entire world, you can call me the anti-Drake Toll. Cincinnati's doing it. Uh-oh. Down go the Cougars. They're going to fall to 20th in the rankings after they lose to unranked Big 12 Cincinnati, who would not enter into the top 25, I bet. Cincinnati's got it. Cincinnati's got it on lockdown. You can just lock and key, take it to the bank, safety deposit box. Yeah, Bearcats. You know what? 40-20. They're running away with it. Oh yeah, big time.
Let me insert here. Real Cougar fans know what you're doing right now, and they appreciate it.
Yeah, Bearcats, the big Bearcats. That's what we're calling them this week. Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU, great as always. I'm going to try again with my best bets. Why? Because why the heck not? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So I'm about to get to my best bets for the week. If you think I'm staying cold as Antarctica, then you can go fade the picks over at FanDuel. If you think I am about to get hotter than Dante's Inferno, then you can go ride the picks over at FanDuel, or you can make your own. Do whatever you want. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, time for me to get back to the winning ways. Just as I'd gotten over 500 with my picks last week against the spread, all lines, of course, provided by our friends at FanDuel, I took a big step back. 1-5. Thank you, San Diego State, for saving me from embarrassment. But yikes, last week was a yikes. Let's start with the first game that I've got on the board. Syracuse traveling to Notre Dame. A ton of points. A ton of points for Notre Dame to cover here. And I think the Irish are plenty explosive to win this game comfortably. I'm just picking the number here because according to our friends at FanDuel, this is a 35.5 point spread. Is that warranted? In many ways, yes. Syracuse has lost 6 in a row. It's not going well for Fran Brown and company. The Irish have every single reason to keep their foot on the gas because they're pushing for a playoff spot. They can't afford to lose, and they don't want to get into resume debates. So playing a close game against a bad Syracuse team would be really, really bad. Now, Notre Dame is going to win this game by a lot, by more than 20, maybe even more than 30. I think that's really feasible for the Irish here. I don't think this line is totally absurd. And I won't even be shocked if I'm picking the wrong side. I just think it's a ton of points. In Syracuse's 6-game losing streak, they have not lost by over 35 points. Duke got them bad 38-3 a while back, but their offense has found a way to put up at least one touchdown a game. So if they can do that against Notre Dame, just one touchdown, you score 7 and 10 points, you're talking about being able to allow somewhere in the neighborhood of 42 to 45 points. Syracuse has only allowed 2 schools to hit the 40-point threshold this year. Georgia Tech a few weeks ago, and Tennessee early in the season. I like Notre Dame's offense a lot. I think the Irish are going to win. I don't think it's going to be close. 35.5, just a little bit too big of a number. 42-10. 42-10, Notre Dame rolls, but Syracuse gets the cover. 35.5 points. The second biggest spread I have put into the best bets this year. The other one, it didn't work out. I was on the favorite side of 41.5, Penn State against FIU. It didn't go well. Little did I know how the season would unfold for the Nittany Lions. So that's the first game. I've got 3 underdogs and 3 favorites this week. Second underdog, this one's out of principle, goes against a team I have railed against for a really long time here on the show, and that's North Carolina. They are at home in a rivalry game against Duke, getting 6.5. I think Duke is pretty defeated. After their loss to Virginia last week, in which they played poorly on both sides of the ball, they are now done for the ACC championship game. They had a backdoor way to get into the playoff. That's all done. Duke is not bad. Duke is not as good as they should be, particularly on defense. The North Carolina offense has not been very good, but has shown some signs of life in the second half of the year. The rule that I have, unless I'm given compelling evidence, and then it's usually stay away if I feel this way, take the points in a rivalry game. North Carolina getting 6.5. I'll take Duke to bounce back and squeak it out. But I think it's 27-23. North Carolina covers the 6.5. My super dog, well, it's not a super dog. It's too small of an upset to be that. But the underdog who I think gets an outright win this week is UTSA. They are at home against East Carolina in an American Conference battle. Sneaky backdoor playoff implications here. Not that East Carolina would be able to get in. They can't. But The Pirates are a one-loss team and could find their way to the American Championship game if tiebreakers were to work in their favor if they stay at one loss. So UTSA's not getting there. That's disappointing for the Roadrunners. Meet. But UTSA can knock them out of that fold. If you're a North Texas fan, if you're a Tulane fan, you would like East Carolina to lose. More North Texas. Tulane's in control of their own destiny there to make the American because of the tiebreaker. If there's no head-to-head, which there isn't with North Texas or Navy, then you take the team that's highest ranked in the college football playoff, and that's, of course, Tulane, because they're the only G5 that is ranked. UTSA under Jeff Traylor, getting 2.5 points at home. They beat Tulane on their home field earlier this year. That helped extend their winning streak. They are 24-0 under Jeff Traylor in American Conference home games. I'll take that trend to continue. Plenty of points in this one. UTSA 34, East Carolina 30. A lot of points in this game. Both teams can really throw the football, but Jeff Traylor at home gets it done. And in the second half of what's been a disappointing year, his team, I think, is starting to surge. I think they keep that home conference winning streak unblemished. They go to 25-0 against the Pirates. Speaking of good teams to bet on at home, Utah is laying a big number this week, and it's 17.5 against Kansas State. Here's why I take the Utes. Even though that half-point hook at 17 scares me a little, Utah has only had 2 outcomes in Big 12 games this year. They have either lost or they have absolutely, positively dominated teams into oblivion. Utah is still in contention for the college football playoff. Are they in control of their own fate? No. Can they get enough help to get in? I believe the answer to that question is yes. They have dominated teams over and over again. It is one of the key factors that's keeping them in the discussion, is they are winning big unless they are losing. There has been no in-between in a Big 12 conference game. So against a Kansas State team that, look, has maybe figured a couple things out, but overall has also had a supremely disappointing year, Utah at home, 38-17. They take care of Kansas State and roll, lay the 17.5. Here's one that I am so scared of, but I'm taking anyway. Georgia Tech minus 2.5 against Pitt. Discussed this game earlier on the show. Told you I like Georgia Tech to win. Putting in my best bets because Georgia Tech at home on senior day with Haynes King, man, guy's a warrior. If Georgia Tech goes to the playoff, Haynes King should go to New York as a Heisman Trophy finalist because he is putting up insane yardage stats every single week. I'm not talking 300 to 3. I'm talking he's having 400 to 500 yard individual games of total offense, and Georgia Tech just can't get a lot of traction. Now, their opportunity to get into the playoff is by either winning the ACC, which they have to win this game at home against Pitt in order to have that opportunity. And in all likelihood, I don't think there's a tiebreaker where they'd get kept out if they win this because Pitt's a one-loss team and Georgia Tech's next game is Georgia. So this is their final conference game. Maybe they get caught in a look-ahead spot. They could still make the playoff at 10-2 if they beat Georgia next week. But I think that Brent Key and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets against a Pitt team that is fine, but nothing special. Like they're a respectable, solid team. Mason Heinschel playing good ball. The win was taken out of their sails last week against Notre Dame. Now they have to go on the road. Georgia Tech is a team on a mission with a chip on their shoulder because of where they are ranked. I think they roll Pitt at home. I'll take Georgia Tech 34-17. They knock off the Pitt Panthers there. Finally, this one also worries me, but you know what? I'm taking Illinois, who I went against last week. Minus 8.5 at Wisconsin. The Badgers offense, abysmal. The Illinois defense wasn't good enough to get them to the college football playoff this year, but took a step forward last week. I know it was against Maryland, but guess what? Maryland's offense, pretty similar, maybe even better, certainly from a quarterback standpoint, than what you have for the Badgers. So I don't think Wisconsin's getting to double digits. I think they will put up 6, maybe 9 points in this game. I'll give them 9. Luke Altmaier and the Illini playing out his final season of college football. I think they can get to at least 20, so I'll take the Illini to win 24-9, swallow the 8.5 even on the road. So that's Illinois minus 8.5, Georgia Tech minus 2.5, Utah minus 17.5, UTSA plus 2.5, Syracuse plus 35.5, and North Carolina plus 6.5 against Duke. Best bets of the week. Gotta be over 500 going into rivalry week. Just has to happen. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.